From Lambert High School, this is Carter McCullum with Serial. This is the final episode of Serial. We're going to share our opinions on who really killed Hae Min Lee and tell you about some new evidence that was missed for the last 15 years.
Our first piece of evidence that was missed by the police in Serial was possibly the most important to the case itself. First, we need to give you the science behind it. Postmortem lividity is the settling of blood under the influence of gravity, which develops in the early postmortem interval. When you die, blood stops circulating through your body. The blood then settles in the part of your body that is close to the ground. The part of the body where the blood settles, the skin turns purple or red. Lividity generally becomes apparent within a short period after death and is said to become fixed between 8 and 12 hours of death. When a body has fixed lividity, the color of their skin is very dark and purple. This can tell you how long a person has been dead for and if they were moved after they died.
A podcast called Crime Junkies gives a brief summary of why this is important to the Hae Min Lee case. The podcast explains he takes her out of the car and buries her sometime between 7 and 7:30. That means for up to 5 hours, Hae would have been in the trunk and livor mortis would have started to set in whatever position she was in the trunk. Then they would have pulled her out, placed her in the depression near that log where she was found, and she was placed on the ground on her right side. So no matter how long she was in the trunk, we should be seeing signs of livor mortis on the right side of her body. But that is not what the findings showed. Hae had full fixed lividity on the front side of her body. This means that Hae was not buried 6 weeks earlier because she looked purple on the front side of her body, not the right side.
Another important thing to mention about the case is that in order to prove that someone else killed Hae, you have to prove that Adnan did not kill Hae. That should be relatively easy, considering that there is no real physical evidence against Adnan. The state was able to convict Adnan because of one person's word, Jay's.
Jay's story of Adnan wanting to kill Hae and saying that he actually did this is why Adnan was convicted. The prosecution used call logs of Adnan's phone that Jay was using the day of Hae's murder. However, these call logs never seemed to match up with Jay's story entirely, and didn't match up with the interviews Sarah had with other people. According to Sarah from episode 5, she states, "Experts say law enforcement's use of cell phone records can be inaccurate. Federal courts in Oregon and Illinois have ruled cell phone evidence inadmissible. The problems arise when you start trying to say, I can prove you were at such and such place at such and such time because the cell tower and the phone pinged. You can't do that with certainty because of the way cell towers get activated and how much territory they cover. In fact, these sorts of records are mostly useful as a way to say where someone wasn't rather than where he or she was." Episode 5, page 10.
That is just one of the many ways Jay's story makes no sense. Besides the fact it constantly changes and the cell phone records are not entirely accurate, so how could they say exactly where someone is with complete certainty with an inaccurate method? The inconsistencies of Jay's story and the fact that cell records can't tell where Jay really showed that Jay is lying about the story and Adnan is innocent and the murderer is someone else.
Another snag in Jay's story that was not noticed or mentioned by Serial, or that came up during any of the trials, is also explained in the Pinecrest podcast, Crime Junkies. Hae's car was parked on a grassy lot for 6 weeks, according to Jay. During those 6 weeks, the weather was particularly nasty. There were ice storms and everything. Here's what Crime Junkies had to say about it. During this time, there were winter storms like the snow and ice, and it was nasty, but her car was perfectly clean. The grass spot next to her car was completely dead because another car had been parked over it. So we would assume that this is what we would see under Hae's car because it had been there so long. But the grass under Hae's car was perfectly green. Crime Junkies, 21 minutes to 22 minutes. This piece of evidence promotes the idea that Hae's car was not parked on the lot for 6 weeks. Maybe someone moved the car on the lot, told Jay where it was, and Jay told the police where the car was.
Now enough about Adnan and why he is innocent, and why Jay has been lying about pretty much everything this whole time. It's time to talk about the real serial killer. His name is Ronald Lee Moore. This is something that the police and detectives looked over during the murder of Hae. That fact that a real serial killer and psychopath was out and about during the time Hae was killed should raise a red flag.
In episode 12 of Serial, Sarah is having a conversation with Deidre, and Deidre says, "He said my guy was in prison a lot. He said he had a really tiny window of being out and about and was very active while he was out and about. So he said during that time that he was out, we linked him to 2 rapes and a murder, and the motives in all of them appeared to be burglary, but he's always had sex with people." Then Deidre says, and he said that he got out and became active for 14 months. His release was January 1st, 99. Episode 12, page 13. Deidre saying that there was a murderer who was released from prison at the time of Hae's death. And when he was arrested again, he was charged with murder and rape.
The charge of murder should raise a red flag, though. If he had committed one murder, it is possible he committed another. Is it possible he committed another? Definitely. If Ronald Lee Moore was out at the time of Hayes' death and was a known murderer, then he should have been a suspect in Hayes' death. There was also DNA that was never tested from Hayes' case, so there's a possibility that belongs to Moore.
The murder of Haymon Lee is a very mysterious one, with no real evidence existing. It was hard to find out what really happened back in 1999. However, after the case was over, new details emerged. DNA, a moved car, a killer who was out of prison at the time of Hayes' death, and the signs point away from Adnan and start to point towards the real serial killer. Ronald Lee Moore, if you look at Adnan's word, then you could see that there is possibility of someone else killing Hay.